Hello, listeners. This is Dr. Saumya Badgayan, and you're listening to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast, where we bring you candid, thought-provoking conversations with top HR leaders and experts. And here's your host, Pulkit Joshi.
Today, we have the privilege of hosting Dr. Saumya Badgayan. Dr. Saumya is the Vice President of HR Business Strategy at Gold Star Jewelry Private Limited. She is a seasoned professional with over 20 plus years of experience in HR discipline. She possesses a robust academic background and numerous credentials to herself. Dr. Saumya holds a PhD in e-commerce, an MA in psychology, an MBA in marketing and international trade, and a postgraduate diploma in HR, being a gold medalist. She is a distinguished member of the Institute of Directors, a prestigious network of business leaders and professionals. Dr. Saumya's expertise lies in designing and executing organizational transformation strategies, spearheading digital transformation initiatives, creating innovative motivational solutions, and implementing fair practices through the application of analytics in the HR domain. Beyond her corporate role, Dr. Saumya is deeply involved in education and training. She serves as a professor of practice at Vauxhall University and holds the position of visiting faculty at IFEL, earning multiple awards for her outstanding faculty performance. As a mentor affiliated with NASCOM and Skills Hack, Dr. Saumya is a recognized keynote speaker, having shared her insights on over 150 platforms. She is also an author, contributor, a world record holder, and manages a YouTube channel where she translates real-life experiences into valuable lessons. Dr. Saumya's mission is centered on empowering individuals and organizations to attain excellence and growth through learning and transformation. Always eager to expand her knowledge, share her expertise, and contribute to the advancement of HR profession and society at large, Dr. Saumya remains dedicated to her vision of making a lasting impact through continuous learning and strategic leadership. Dr. Saumya, thanks for taking out time to speak with us today, and welcome to the CHRO Mindset Podcast.
Thank you so much, Pulkit ji, for having me over. Thank you.
Great. So let's get going with our first question. If you could have a conversation with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Oh, that's that's a lovely question to ask. And we all have heard about Hitler, and we all know the kind of genocide that prevailed. But one thing that I really admire about him is the way that he stood for what he believed in. So the conversation that I would really love to engage is that there could have been a better way to word out your dislike about a certain movement rather than polarizing the nation towards, or the world towards, towards a spectrum where it led to a world war. So yes, that would be an interesting conversation, knowing more about what he was as a person and less of a dictator, and what made him come out as a dictator. So yes, I would love to have that chat with him, if possible.
Okay, a very interesting choice here, Dr. Saumya. Let's now discuss, some of the stories that you would have encountered as you evolve as an HR leader, right, across these 2.5 decades. So please walk us through what inspired you to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in your HR career.
Sure. So, very few people, Pulkit ji, know that I was a hardcore salesperson for major part of my career, the developmental phase, as we call them. So, I was into international sales of jewelry. I lost my husband to cancer in 2014, and jewelry requires a lot of traveling, if you are into sales. At that point of time, I decided that, if I have to take care of my child, and she was just 9 years of age at that moment, it was better if I take a desk job which required minimum travel so that I could concentrate and focus on her. As we all know, that cancer actually takes away a lot of, and drains you, emotionally, more so than anything else. So I wanted to be with my daughter. And that is where this journey into HR began. interestingly enough, HR was always looked at more from a very, I would say, a passive function. You know, it was more directed by the board, saying that, hey, you just need to, fulfill certain statutes. So the real contribution was not coming as far as gems and jewelry industry was concerned, and also in my organization. Till the time, the first major step that I took was dissolving the union. You know, that was first step. And second was that I am a firm believer in fair play practices. So for me, it does not matter if a person is of a certain orientation, of a certain liking, as long as the person is a true contributor. So coming back to your question of DNI and E, that's where it all started. The thought seed started from there. Gems and jewelry industry is a very, it's a very primitive kind of an industry in the sense of thought process also, and in terms of its longevity and existence on this planet. You know, we've seen the Romans and the Grecian walls and also the Egyptians who would also mummify their bodies in gold. So jewelry always existed in one form or the other. When it came to diversity and inclusion, that was my first thought, that we need to bring in people from the other spectrum of society and introduce them in the workforce. There were two reasons. A, need of the industry, because we were competing with the Swiggies and the Zomatos. Even though gems and jewelry pays really well to their employees, there's a higher risk involving because you are dealing with high value raw material. So just to give you an example, if a Swiggy man decides to be dishonest, or a Swiggy person decides to be dishonest, the usher or the person who is your server, the most damage that the person can do is just eat up your food package. Here, we're talking about diamonds and, gold and other precious metal. So what we did was that we wanted to bring in people, also add into the workforce and open their vistas that, hey, there is more than you can do to it. That is where, with the help of an NGO, we created a mind map which allowed people to embrace, and believe you me, 80% of our workforce comes from an economical and socially, very low strata of the society where openness to such kind of thought lines is not there. But we managed to navigate through all of that. So now we have eunuchs, we have people from all the spheres of LGBTQ, but interestingly so, we have people who were street walkers or who were prostitutes. Their identity is not disclosed to anyone. We have given them employment. We have people with certain criminal records, and we've given them employment. Also, their identity is known only and only to me and my recruitment head. And these people were falsely implicated in certain crimes. But this is where our diversity spectrum lies. It is not just to the LGBTQ. It is much more than that. And they have shown their worth in the system. They are doing very well. And of course, we also have specially abled people, people who are deaf and mute, people who have physical challenges. And amazing, you just walk through the floor and you will see them coming up with beautiful designs, the way that they present themselves, and most importantly, they have a hunger and a drive to prove. So that's where we kind of want to become the voice for the less fortunate, if I can use the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Saumya. I'm sorry for the loss that you have had. And I'm at loss of words given the kind of transformation that you've brought in within the organization from a DEI perspective. I'm super sure this would have left a lot of listeners out there inspired. It certainly inspired me a lot. Thank you for sharing that. Let's now look at another aspect, right, which each one of us has had in their leadership journeys, right? We all have mentors and guides who, help us in those darkest hours, and that's where we learn the most. So, please walk us through any piece of advice that you would have received early in your career that has had a lasting impact on your professional journey. It could be related to sales or could be HR, because I know you started with sales as the discipline. So, regardless of what discipline that was.
So I would say that 2000 was the year when I got married and came to Mumbai. Okay, as is we were like very from a small town in Jabalpur. I got married to someone in Mumbai. Arranged marriage, and of course you have your adjustments happening and all, and still trying to know the person that you're married to. So I picked up a job in Mahalakshmi, and it was the first crossword bookstore. So the first boss that I had was Mr. Sriram, all right, and he was the one who instituted the whole idea of crossword. So we used to be given one entire, book, shelf that used to have various categories like fiction and management and poems and you name it. So, and I was a newly married woman trying to manage house as well as the work. So, and we had to write little excerpts and our suggestions and book reviews for the books that were there on the shelf. So, Jeza was my friend, my colleague in that department, and I said, Jeza, I have not read any of the books. Could you help me? So she penned down beautiful reviews, and she said, Saumya, you can use this. Fantastic. I used it. And then I was standing very confidently, and Mr. Sriram, he walks in and he says, I mean, he's uber polite, I've never come across such a humble soul in my entire life. He comes and he does his, hi and hellos and how have you been and on. And he said, I like the review you wrote. And I was also like, yes, he's happy and all that. And he said, what do you think about this? And then he went into characters. अभी पढ़ा होगा तब तो characters पता होंगे ना, कुछ पता ही नहीं था. And then I confessed, I said, I'm so sorry, Sriram. Jeza helped me to write this. He smiled and he said, come darling, we'll have a cup of coffee. So at that point of time, Crossword also had a coffee shop within it. I said, Maragai, Saumya, you slaughtered, you dead. Today is your last day, as your day in Crossword. Anyway, I go to him. I was like hanging my head down because June Bola, and that was eating me from within. He said, darling, it's all okay to say that you did not do a job rather than lying and saying that, well, you did something. And that is the only lesson, few simple words, but that's the lesson that I have held on to in all of my 25 years of corporate life, that if I don't know, I will never say that I know X, Y, and Z and pretend to know it. I would always go seek help and ask people that, hey, can you help me with this thing? And then I would also give due credit to the people who've helped me. So my biggest lesson is don't lie and give credit for honest work. Thank you.
Awesome. That's quite a story, and thanks for sharing that. And I totally agree with you. I think that's like a cardinal rule, right? That everybody has to adhere to. If that goes for a toss, then everything goes for a toss. Awesome. Let's keep going. And let's now talk about crisis management, right? All the organizations undergo crisis, right? Once in a while, or maybe if the things are not in good shape, it happens a little more frequently. And many a times when that happens, it's the HR team that swings into action, or the admin team, right? And case in point, could be a pandemic, right? I mean, COVID was a prime example of how HRs and admin teams came together and did a lot of work which was unfathomable at that point in time or even prior to that. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions around crisis management from here on. Please talk us through what's the biggest misconception about HR's role in crisis management. I'm sure there's a lot of myths, but we would request you to cover the ones that you think are most important for our listeners.
The first myth is assuming that HR knows it all and that HR can itself never encounter any problem. Now, why I am saying this is because when the pandemic hit, it hit us all, irrespective of which department or which function that the person was struggling with. So a lot of people and their families started, accusing HRs that, hey, you are unable to help me, whereas HRs themselves are also as much affected by the pandemic than, any of us. So HR is not know-all and, is not the only go-to department. It's the team and all the other departments that hold hands together and navigate through any of these kind of circumstances. Case in point being that we were allowed 33% of our workforce post the government gave us some relaxation to open, and people were working in our offices and premises. Unfortunately, one of the maintenance guy, very young guy, that point of time he developed fever and of course COVID. No matter how much we were trying to get him a medical aid, it was not possible because the hospitals were flooded with cases, and each of them were wielding their own power. Volstar being one of the company that I come from, we're not that huge in name, as opposed to a Tata's or a Reliance or things like that. So it was very difficult for us to get, get him to one hospital. Unfortunately, we lost a life right at the doorstep of one of the hospitals where we managed to secure a space. The family was, devastated. Of course, I mean, there's no word for it. But at the same time, what we realized was that, thankfully so, they never came back, hounding and shouting on us. And coming from that kind of a mature mindset, despite encountering this kind of a huge loss, spoke volumes of the values that were inculcated in them of the past things that we did, we've done for the person. And that being said, I would say that, a lot of people, take the HR function for granted, which shouldn't have been. And, I hope this makes sense to what I'm saying, but this is one of the ways that we can't manage all the crises is what I want to say. Second, there is one when there was a change in technology. So from a physical workspace, we had to move to the ethereal workspace. Gems and jewelry industry cannot say that, oh, I'll give you a small amount of diamond and a small amount of gold. Please go home, work and give us back that product. It cannot happen like that. So the way that entire thing happened was we were probably the first industry to come into the hybrid structure, wherein all those functions that, like the designing, the CAD CAMs, the other aspects like the shared functions, that were moved to the hybrid functions, and then that is how they were performing together in that organizational matrix. So that is where we immediately shifted from, and that point of time, our IT did a phenomenal job, because there were people who didn't have access to laptops and desktops. And we took special permission because we work out of seats. We took special permission, and 300 such consoles were delivered at employees' residences for them to be able to function. So, two examples, one where not all crises can be managed, and the other example, if everyone in an organization comes together, because IT needed support from HR in terms of where people stay, what is the distance, can we get them some, and then admin coming in, taking care of the lorries, getting them special permissions. So everyone worked together and navigated this crisis. So two examples saying that it can be managed and at times it cannot be managed, but it is something that we need to be okay with without killing ourselves. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Saumya. Let's now talk about one lever which can help HR professionals up their game when it comes to crisis management, and talking about technology. So in your opinion, what role does technology play in HR's crisis management strategy?
I would say that more than that, it is very important for people to know their businesses. Most of the time, HR does not know the business. And if you don't know the business, and if you've just been a very passive kind of a function, then it becomes very difficult. And that's when I would say, that knowing the business and being able to do that is very important. The rest, everything falls in place. Now, technology, every day you are seeing so many technologies being thrown at you. Today we are having a meeting on Teams. There was Skype earlier. Then there was WhatsApp. Then there are others, that we can use, more often. But it is what suits your needs the best. Just because someone else is doing it does not mean that you should do. So it is very subjective to the industry, to your needs, and what is it that you're trying to problem solve. I would say that would be my answer. Now, for Gold Star, we are now moving to a digital transformation wherein we are also getting, because this industry is always, fighting for labor. And now we are also getting into robotics. So very soon we'll have robots also working alongside our manual labors. So this is how we have graduated, and we are graduating. So at the moment, we are just having pick and place robots. But I'm seeing that very soon, government has allowed drones to deliver, your pizzas at your doorstep. Maybe we'll also start using it. It all depends.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those insights. Let's now switch gears a bit. Let's segue into, we're going to be talking about crisis only, but more like a subtopic. Let's now talk about how can leaders display or demonstrate resilience in the times of crisis. So please talk to us. How do you define leadership resilience in the context of HR?
So I would say 3 words. First is accept, yes, there is a crisis. Acknowledge that these are the factors that are in it, and then devise a strategy to ace it. May sound, very vague, but this is the only method through which one can, navigate through crisis. I would also say that a lot of people, when they are in good times, they are in the happy hours. They tend to forget that there will ever be a crisis, And once you are in that mode of being in the happy hour, you will look or overlook what can be the next problem. So I'll just give you an example. So I started my career with a paging service, right? And paging services maybe used to be the customer service executives who used to take the calls, and we used to type in the messages on alphanumeric and numeric pagers. When we were doing that, in a year's time, the technology turned, and then there was mobile, the mobile phones that you are seeing. But the company for which we were working, it was a government-funded agency. They did not, foresee that this could be a competition coming up, even though they had a lot of insiders' knowledge. And when that happens and you do not act upon the knowledge that you have, that's where it's a doomsday conspiracy. So I would say that crisis management is based on historical data, something that is going to have, going to come in the future. You have to preempt everything and then design. You always need to have a buffer ready. So like I always say, taking this from the biblical times, that for every crisis, there is a Noah who carefully built his ark. So please build that ark to weather all the storms. Otherwise, this will not function. So I have seen the transition. I've seen companies collapsing just because they were too boisterous. Oh, we can't be touched. We are too huge to be touched. This will not affect us, but it does. There's a lot of resistance in adopting anything. Second is that when we talk about resilience, now what is resilience? People often think resilience and resistance are, sides of the same coin, which is not the fact. Resilience also means agility. You need to understand when is the time to make that switch, whether it is from a real life scenario or whether it is in any of such circumstances. The company that I was working for, when we transitioned, right, it was a very quick transition, and then they realized, hey, well, we can use the towers that are there for the pager devices and convert them into the towers for mobile devices. And when they realized that, that is where it became a saving grace. So that's the resilience that the leadership should exhibit. And also, panic is something that one shouldn't even know the word. There's nothing like panic. Panic will not work for any of the leaders. So resilience, resistance, agility, and panic. So do not get into resistance and panic, but get into resilience and agility is what I would say.
Great. Love those 4 tenets there, Dr. Saumya. Let's now look at the long and short of crisis management from a leadership perspective, talking about HR. So how do you balance the need for immediate crisis management, which is the short term, with long-term resilience building?
Okay. So recently we had there was a fire in one of the factories close to our, close to where our factories are. And the smoke that was billowing from that factory entered our premises, and our workforce started experiencing burning sensation in their eyes, and they were coughing because of definitely the smoke. No matter how much we were trying to convince the other party this was post the fire was doused and the fire department came and everything was under control. No matter how much we were requesting them, they were not paying heed to opening the windows, and they may have their own reasons. I'm not going to get into the rights and the wrongs of it. But when we saw that, the production arrested for 2 hours, 2 and 3 hours, and which is a loss of production. Now, how did we navigate it, right? The workforce as is was unwell because they had inhaled a lot of smoke. We let them off that day. We paid them for that day. They went home early. And then we said, the next day when they walk in, willfully, if they are willing to pitch in their extra hours, we will be able to make the production chart in time. And when they heard this, believe you me, not a single blue collar employee came up asking for the overtime. They said, you guys were so good to us and you took care of us. And this is something that, we would come back to. A very small example, but this is where empathy in crisis management also helps. That's one. So, are you there, Pulkit ji, with me?
Yes, I'm very much in. Yeah. Please go on.
So that is how, empathy worked for us in crisis management. The other thing is that when we saw them in a lot of trouble because their production is completely gone, so their management requested our management that would you be able to take part of our production because we have, customers that we are committed to. And our management said yes, only and only for X amount of labor, which was not charged beyond, and no one took advantage of any of their vulnerability at that point of time. So leadership, acknowledging a crisis and not taking it to their advantage in a wrong way is also something that I would say is a huge value that comes in. And the third being that in a crisis, we need to have a committee that comes forth and does an action. Do you have a committee that will be that, and this committee should have people from finance, people from HR, people from production, if you are into manufacturing or the shared services, and of course your managing director or the CEO who should sit together and deal with the crisis. Most of the time there are no committees that exist in SMEs and MMEs. In the larger organizations, yes, you have these committees, but SMEs and MMEs they don't have, and that's where they're running pillar to post, finding a way to problem solve a solution. So these are my 3 points that I would say. Thank you.
Great. That's a fantastic framework. Thanks for sharing that. Let's now talk about HR technology in detail. And let's talk about some of the latest technologies that have come into being. So my first question for you, Dr. Saumya, is how can HR leaders proactively address potential biases in AI algorithms, right? Speaking of generative AI and ChatGPT, to ensure fair and equitable decision-making in talent management processes.
So interesting, I was reading an article the other day, Pulkit ji, and it is known as white spacing. Okay. So I don't know if people know about white spacing, but just putting in my words so that it becomes easier for all of us to understand what it is. So white spacing is like, you have my credentials, my CV, for example, and but in that, it is written, Saumya is the worst candidate. And people do that, they sabotage it. But it is written in white fonts, which is not readable to a person like you and me. And the CV below says some is exceptionally good, some is this, some is that, or everything that a CV contains. The moment that CV hits the augment AI part of it, artificial intelligence, and the sifting of the CVs happen, it was found that a lot of good CVs were being rejected. And there were two 14 years old who broke into the Silicon Valley as CTOs and CIOs. That got them, intrigued. How the hell did this happen? And that's where they discovered something which is known as white spacing, which you and me, because when you take the print out, those words are invisible to you, but the computer can read it. So this is something which is the scary part of artificial intelligence. This is something that also machine learning is doing, because repeatedly it is being taught, you know.
Yeah.
And if you keep on playing with that, then of course it learns the wrong things. Like any human being would learn the wrong things if we keep on throwing the person in that same environment. So I would say technology, if used, can be a boon. If used otherwise, can be a pain, and a pain. But it is all up to us as how we navigate through it. Um, I would still suggest um, a 60-40 ratio, wherein 60%, because if there is some people like Infosys or Wipros or some banks, wherein a lot of CVs come in, and manually sifting through CV becomes difficult. Yes, please use technology, but 40% there has to be, people and, a human touch who needs to still go back and see why CVs were rejected. So that's one. That is something that I would really, really lay emphasis on. Not 100% can be technology dependent. The other part is that when we are trying to bring in a fair play in the system, and now that we all are in that space of gauging our performance, this is the performance appraisal time for us. So once we have that, that is where we also need to use technology as to what we had gauged the person in the past and what the result is showing today. Map that graph and bring forth what you think is the critical potential matrix that we all join. So technology should be used very, very carefully with a lot of you need to be very, very certain of what you're using. You just can't use it arbitrarily and say, oh, this is something that a bot did for me. Yeah. There has to be a lot of human intervention that is required. Now that we know the scary part of human technology, of the technology and the humans in being. So yes, that would be my 2 cents on it.
Great, thank you for that. Let's now talk about any strategies that you would have implemented to address potential biases in the AI algorithms that you use for HR decision making.
So we actually have our own ERP system that we've developed. So we've not bought in anything from outside. We did try the ERP that we had, but it did not suffice our requirement because jewelry being a very complicated business as such. We have used AI only for our data bank when it comes to design and less for manpower. Because of the simple reason that we know that it can be played around and tweaked around. And also, to be very honest with you, we don't get thousands of CV. Our CVs would range between 50, 70 and 80 at the most. So it's easier for us to do the things manually. We're still doing it manually, but not to that extent like, using artificial intelligence. Rest, I think we are very comfortable in what we are doing at the moment.
Okay. Thank you for that. Last question, Dr. Saumya. This has to do with any piece of literature, book, documentary, anything under the sun that has influenced your leadership journey.
So Wolves of the Yellowstone. Okay, that's a documentary. It's an old documentary. And it is about, I don't know if you know about this documentary, but I take a lot of lessons from National Geographic and from the animal kingdom. Right from my pregnancy also. My mother was like, oh, you need to take care, you need to do that. I said, well, I'm just pregnant, I'm not sick. And imagine out there in the wild, a deer is giving birth and there are these leopards and there are these, other predators, lions and all, eyeing, oh wow, salivating that, wow, we've got a tender meat now. So I said, at least you are lucky. We're not there. We still have hospitals, right? So I come from that thought line that if animals can, so can we. So Wolves of the Yellowstone is a beautiful, beautiful documentary wherein it started with a lot of these wolves were poached, seeing that these wolves were harming and getting into the city lights and all. So they were poached and the fur was really used. And when that started happening, it affected it also affected the grazing animals, because grazing animals started to grow in population. When the grazing animals started to grow in population, they started eating the grassland. When they started eating the grassland, the river that was running through, that started eroding it, because there were no other grasses or shrubs to hold on to the soil, because they were all eaten by the grazing animals. And then there was a whole turnaround of the ecosystem. That's where the environmentalists, they recognized, oh, because the top line predators, wolves, were taken away, this is how the entire ecosystem, changed. So they introduced the wolves back. Wolves started eating the deer. The grasses started growing. The river started flowing. In the river, the fishes came back, which was food for the grizzlies and the bears. That happening, there were also beavers who came inside and started building small dams. When they started building small dams, that also started fertilizing the land around them. Now, find the wolves in your organization, because when you kill the wolf, you damage the entire ecosystem. So you need predators also in organizations, not in the wrong sense, but in the right way, who can come around and keep the environment healthy. They can also be disruptors, and they can be your change agents. That is what my 2 cents are.
What a perspective. Thanks for sharing that. I love that. Okay, this is the end of this amazing conversation. Dr. Saumya, thank you for sharing your valuable insights and expertise on the CHRO Mindset podcast. It certainly enriched our discussion, and I loved the wealth of knowledge in the HR discipline that you brought to today's conversation. It was amazing to have you on today's podcast.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be with you, and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. To all our listeners, a sincere thank you for your continued support. We trust you enjoyed today's episode of the CHRO Mindset with Dr. Saumya. Stay engaged for future episodes as we delve deeper into the realms of strategic HR and modern day workplaces.
Thanks for listening to the CHRO Mindset podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. Join us next week for another insightful conversation with a top HR leader. And if you have any questions or feedback, reach out to us on social media or via email. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next week.